Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Grain Market Blast, where the glamorous goddess of grain herself, Angie, will be providing us a rapid roundup of the latest pricing, flows, and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, did I mention that it's Thursday, the 2nd of October, all day today? But before she cracks on, I'll get the legals out the way. Nothing discussed on this podcast, not a Spaces session anymore, indicates trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by myself, Ryan Paisley, the glamorous goddess of grain herself, Angie Setzer, or indeed PIQ. Angie, it's Thursday. How the devil are you? How is the Thunderdome?
Thunderdoming, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm here. And
You do realise when we do talk about the Thunderdome, you do realise I picture you dressed as Tina Turner from Mad Max.
I was hoping more like Xena Warrior Princess, but I guess I'll pick Tina Turner too.
And obviously I'm that little, the little fella, the little kid with the boomerang.
Right. That's awesome. I love it. So yeah, happy Thursday. Yesterday was definitely started out as one of those days where I was like, oh no, we suck again. But then towards the end, it was kind of it wasn't bad. So, biggest things we're watching obviously is we had President Trump post yesterday afternoon that let me go to find it real quick so I don't misquote him. Basically, soybean farmers of our country are being hurt because China is, for negotiating reasons, not buying. Excuse me. So basically, he just said that we're going to give some help to our farmers. I'm not going to let our farmers down. We're going to be talking about soybeans when we have the ability to get with China here at the end of the month and blah, blah, blah. And so, fast forward to the end of the close, basically, and you saw the bean market make a key reversal from the day prior. You saw the corn market bounce off what has been pretty solid support. One second.
Oh.
You ever have one of those moments where you just inhale the tiniest bit of and you're just done for?
Like, do I power through and try not to cough, or do I just...
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make it. But so you had the Trump tweet, or the Trump Truth Social post, I guess, that became a tweet. And that lit the market on fire. And I've said this more than once, right? You and I have had this conversation more than once. To me, the biggest risk at these price levels right now isn't that China doesn't show up, because that's what's baked into this market.
Right.
It's that they do, and we really don't have the room for it. Now, you could, when I say we don't have the room for it, I mean, we don't have the room for them to show up and buy 20 million, 25 million metric ton or whatever. Like, it's just, it would be way too tight. Like, you just don't have the ability to add in a whole bunch more in the way of export business, honestly, than what the USDA is currently projecting. But the market right now is factoring in a bigger drop in export business than what is currently being shown by the USDA, you could say. So, to see that yesterday, obviously, President Trump is paying attention. I do have to commend this administration because they are paying attention. I don't know if you saw the tweet or the picture floating around of Bessent during his UN, I think it was during the UN conversation last week with the Argentina thing. Like, by the way, we're bailing out Argentina.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The over-the-shoulder WhatsApp message. Yeah.
Yeah, tweet. Yeah, that's my friend Ben. So he's had a fun week for sure. But they are paying attention. And, and we did see Bessent say this morning that they will announce a big program or a big plan in early next week. I am very, 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 very hopeful that, since this administration is paying attention, a lot of folks think that the farmer is out here with their hand out wanting some sort of direct payment. 90% of the farmers that I talk to, there's a handful of them that could just always use a cash infusion and are like, okay, send it my way, please. I would like that. It'll help me keep the lights on. But the majority of them are like, we need long-term fixes. We need, a substantial biofuel policy. We need to have the USDA communicating.
They don't want to be. They don't want to be hand to mouth, right? They want to be able to build, especially with farmers. We love you, farmers, but they're building kind of generational kind of investments here.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they're spending millions now. Like we had a conversation yesterday at a farmer that I was talking to that, we were talking about some of the potential plans or the ways that the administration could help support the industry currently without it just being a big money grab by input suppliers, because it's basically what, the farmer gets a stimulus check and it's gone. Like, it's not like they get it and they get to keep it. It is automatically, it comes in and it goes right back out. A lot of times with more money attached to it on the way out. I made the
Yeah.
joke yesterday, it's like losing 75 pounds and gaining back 100. That's basically what it is. They get a check for X and, everything just goes up. Everyone has their hand out.
Yeah.
The landlord raises the rent, these types of things. And what really could benefit a grower, a farmer in general is being able to tap into some of the equity that they have that they may not be able to access because of cash constraints. Some of these other things out there that I think the administration could do that would be more beneficial to kind of trying to maintain free market, yada, yada, yada. And so the biggest thing that I want to say though, with the Trump tweet and all of the commotion that we have, surrounding this market right now is that we still see a continuation of really strong demand in
Right.
almost every sector except for China buying from the US. And, to be completely honest, yes, it's the first week of October or whatever, but we still have some time to kind of see how Brazil's going to execute this big export book that they have on for this month. For our, we still have time to see how Argentina is going to execute theirs, which, by the way, as we're talking about this, Argentina is experiencing a bit of a short squeeze.
Yeah.
Last week when you had that export tax holiday announced, it basically, you had a bunch of multinational companies who have the wherewith and the ability to go out and hedge their currency risk, hedge this, that, and the other thing. They basically went out and were like, well, hell yeah, the farmer just got a $2.50 raise. I'm going to put $1 of it in my pocket, and then I'm
Yeah.
going to liquidate these bushels into the global market because then I can see, but when they did that, they sold enough that they hit the 7 billion, but they hadn't bought enough to cover what they had sold. And so now you have some multinational companies or you have some exporters in Argentina that are watching the replacement cost rise as they need to be facilitating some of these sales that they put on. So it'll be interesting to see the dynamic and the execution of these transactions that we have going on here for the next month or so. And as, someone who is in love with cash grain, because I am not that smart, apparently, it's
Lies.
that
Lies.
is it's going to be really fun to watch here for the next little bit, because the biggest thing is we are in the middle of gut slot harvest for soybeans. Like, the bulk of soybean harvest is going to take place this week into the start of next week, because the forecast is pretty much wide open for most everyone until at least Monday. And so once these things are put away, like, if you're going to see this market collapse, it needs to get busy doing it here from a basis
Right.
standpoint in the short term, or it ain't happening, and so that's going to be something that we're going to want to be paying attention to, especially as you see values starting to rise in Argentina. Brazil is basically out of the market. Ukraine just added a 10% export tax on their oilseed exports. We're going to see a continuation of the rest of the world buying. Now it's just a matter of what the administration does with China going forward, and like I've said a million times, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to start seeing arbitrage and other things pop up. But, my friend Eduardo also posted yesterday, if you were an end user around the rest of the world, which everyone's going hand to mouth from a buying standpoint, if you were an end user, your biggest risk now, obviously, like we've said before, is that China comes in and just soaks up all of the free floating bushels that we have out here available at this super wide harvest time basis.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this will be all the thing that we're watching in soybeans. How does the administration approach China? What are we looking at? I tried to mute myself and I did. I missed the button. Um, how does the administration approach China in the conversations? Do you see Trump hint that he is willing to look at reducing the fentanyl tariffs if they're willing to come in? Does this happen before the meeting at the end of the month? Does it not? What are our next steps? And then in addition, we'll just continue to watch what's going on in cash. There's some basis weakness in certain spots. There's some basis strength in others. Corn is going to be slower to get started. It feels like in the Eastern Corn Belt, I might be speaking mostly for my backyard, we're just not drying down, which is a sign that the plant just died. It didn't naturally come to the end of its life ready for harvest. It just basically gave up the ghost about halfway through, and so it's going to be a bit to really get deep into corn harvest. But yeah, we're going to continue to pay attention to all of those things. The government shutdown, we didn't get export sales this morning. We're not going to get them until it reopens. I guess last I knew, they're going to have another vote maybe tomorrow. So we'll see if they can get the other 6 Democrats that they need, because I think they only had 1 Fetterman, or maybe they only need 4. Either way, maybe we'll reopen, maybe we won't. We'll see what that looks like.
Spin the wheel. Spin the wheel.
Right, exactly. If we do, then we'll have a USDA report next week on Friday, which will update yields and things. You'll have crop scouts, USDA crop scouts actually collecting, real harvest data, year weights, yield numbers, and things like that. So that'll be important to pay attention to if we get it. We'll see how the weekend goes with the shutdown. But beyond that, it's just paying attention to how the market is moving, what cash is doing. There is some talk now, and I'm going to try to dive in deeper. Some folks are starting to question France's wheat crop size.
Okay.
The weird, huh? Right, Ryan? Like I've been
Yeah.
talking about for a minute, where I'm
Yeah.
like, it's not matching. Like, you should have harvest pressure. The same thing I'm
Yeah.
saying about soybeans. Like, if you don't see harvest pressure, something's funky. And so in this regard, there's some questions that, maybe these co-ops, receiving wise, aren't matching with the production estimates. Now, that could be the other way. I might be assuming that they're smaller. It might be larger. And so I'm waiting to get a little bit more intel on that. But, that's going to be the thing of a point of interest in a big way. And then lastly, just kind of while we're talking about wheat, the one thing I wanted to point out that I thought was really interesting, we made it through the first quarter of the marketing year. I want to grab my notes out so I make sure I tell it right. But we made it through the first quarter of the marketing year. Basically, June 1st is considered Q1, or the start of the marketing year for June, for
Right.
wheat. Golly. And basically, where we're at with it is Canada and US wheat exports are up 32%. So almost up a third versus a year ago. We're back up to 2020, 2021 levels. And what is most interesting about that is, if you look at it, the EU, the European Union, and the Black Sea exports are down 18%. And so,
Hello.
yeah, so you're still seeing overall global demand increase in a way, right? Because you're seeing the US and Canada, they're 33 up 33. We're only down 18 out of the EU. And so this whole entire story of lacking demand, I don't think is legit necessarily. But are they more hand to mouth? Yes, which could get really interesting if you see a restriction of grain flow out of Ukraine and Russia, simply because they don't have the coverage on Jan forward that they would normally have. There's a lot of wheat millers out there and folks that own wheat that may not have the coverage on that they typically would December forward. And so that could get really interesting too, because basically until southern hemisphere wheat harvest gets here, the wheat is now put away as well. And so there's going to be a lot to pay attention to, but most of it is just watch your tweets, watch the Twitter, see what that has to say, and the rest of it'll be, it'll be what it'll be. We'll keep an eye on basis and spreads and all of that fun stuff here as we work our way into the weekend. And as we get to next Monday, we'll have a bit of a better feel for everything, because we're going to have several days in a row of really solid harvest progress, and it should help to clarify some things.
Have I mentioned that I'm in Vegas next week? So I'll be doing these from the craps table.
They're in Vegas next week. I'm glad that you're at least able to get that. I thought you were banned.
Wow. Well, no, I'm obviously using a different passport this time. If anyone's listening, that's a joke. That is a joke. If anyone from TSA is listening, that is definitely a joke.
It is a joke. It is totally a joke. But the last time you went to Vegas, it was radio silent for so long, I almost sent a bloodhound out there looking for you.
Yeah, we both know what happened the time before that I went to Vegas. But anyway, that's not for this show.
I was both nervous the last time.
Angie, thank you so much. As always, quickly moving on. Listeners, whatever you're doing, stay safe. Take care, keep it tight. I will upload this to the podcast players, Spotify, Apple, etc., as soon as possible. Yeah, keep it tight, stay safe, look after yourselves, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Much love.
Have a good one, guys.